Good afternoon. We are going to try to keep this to right before we have our FEMA test at 2:20. So that's going to keep us honest. If it happens to go off and we're still up here, that's just going to be the end of the conversation. But I'm so delighted to be here with this fantastic group of people to talk about skills-based hiring with you all this afternoon. So I think the way I'll start is just to ask each of them to introduce themselves, talk, a minute or less about their organization and sort of how you fit into this conversation or enter into this conversation about skills-based hiring. And I'll start with Andy, right to my right.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Andy Tonsing. I'm the Vice President of Post-Secondary Education at Stand Together. And we're a philanthropic community dedicated to help every individual fulfill their potential through many different issue areas, including workforce and education. And the areas that we do that is focusing to work with education providers to help them sort of individualize and create better pathways to employment. We work with employers to change their culture and practices around talent, to individualize through skills, aptitudes, and mindset, the connection to different roles, and then also with policy to make sure we're getting out of the ways the different barriers and incentives and how we finance education and workforce.
Great. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Vicki Green, and I'm with GED Testing along with Pearson as well. So I'm the CEO of GED and then on the Pearson executive team. And what I love about this conversation and being part of this is that the GED learner is the learner that's overlooked. And so for me, really focusing on skills and ability is outside just educational attainment. It's also life skills. And so how do we start looking at all of our audiences and all of our learners and all of our adults to fill roles where there's gaps? And then on the workforce skills side, it's how can we show the skills and abilities that the learner has learned and obtained and make sure that there's value behind that, and then also show them the skills that each individual has.
Good afternoon, I'm Dane Lin, Senior Vice President of Corporate Initiatives at the Business Roundtable. I also lead our work on immigration, which you'll hear me talk a little bit about during the course of this conversation, and is an essential part of the solution. Our organization is an organization of CEOs of all US-based companies, some of the largest companies in the country. Our goal is really to promote a thriving economy. It's also to provide opportunity for individuals. And in the context of this conversation, it's about economic mobility. In 2020, the Business Roundtable launched work very similar to the US Chamber of Commerce, known as the Multiple Pathways Initiative. And the objective of, or the goal of that initiative in all of our work focused on workforce is really intended to help companies reevaluate, reimagine, and execute on a new ecosystem for what their talent systems look like from the beginning to the end. So this is not just about rewriting job descriptions. It's rethinking the way we recruit, retain, and advance individuals. So we're looking forward to the discussion, and thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Clay Lord. I'm the Director of Programs for the SHRM Foundation. SHRM Foundation is the 501c3 nonprofit arm of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. We are an international membership organization for HR professionals with about 235,000 members all across the country. We touch millions and millions of lives every day. And in the context of the foundation, our work is to make sure that those HR professionals, as well as hiring managers and executives, are empowered to be agents for social good and to drive that change that's necessary for talent and people in communities all across the country and the world through the lens of work. And so one of our three main initiatives is called Widening Pathways to Work, and is really focused on both expanding access to jobs for people in what we call untapped talent pools, particularly folks with disabilities, people who have been impacted by the justice system, people who are associated with the military and opportunity youth, and then also to encourage employers to integrate a skills-first mindset in their hiring, retention, and advancement practices. And we particularly are focused on making it feasible for employers to get to yes. We don't think the challenge is that a lot of people disagree with the idea that skills first is a good idea. We think that the challenge is that a lot of folks don't understand how to move past agreement into action.
Such an important point to raise, and I want to get to that at one point, but I do want to just sort of maybe set the stage a little bit, and you touched on this, Dean, like so many companies, lots of folks, this is a crowded space of folks talking about skills first, skills-based hiring, this is the future. What are we talking about? Is that just remove the 4-year degree requirement and go about your day? What's, is that it in a nutshell? Sort of for anybody who might want to have a comment on that.
Yeah, I think I want to start by, I want to answer your question by starting with what this is not about, because I think that's equally important. And it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's not about skills in lieu of degrees. I think what we have to think about as we rebuild this ecosystem, and I do think it is about rebuilding the HR ecosystems that we have, is that we're really focused on looking at the range of skills that are essential to the success of the job. And how does that get clearly articulated in the job description is one small but yes important step. And so I think what we need companies to do is step back and ask, what does it take to be successful? What does it take to be successful in this company at the entry level, at the middle management level, and yes, even at the C-suite level? So I think that's the most important part of this work around skills-based hiring.
So I agree with that, and I also then think it's important to sort of carry that the next step farther, which is to then also empower those companies, particularly small and mid-sized companies, with what they need in order to be able to do everything you're talking about. Some of the great examples from earlier today, Marriott, McDonald's, as well as IBM, AT&T, really large companies doing really amazing work are spending their own funds to create their own systems inside those organizations to do that work. And one of the things that I think we're really focused on, and the we I think is actually everyone up here as well as many more, is what about the 99% of businesses that are small to mid-size and need sort of the collective systems that would allow them to move forward there. And there's a lot of opportunity to make that happen as we figure out how to work together to sort of build technologies and utilize both technologies and trainings in order to improve the kind of opportunities for hiring managers, HR professionals, and executives to kind of pull talent from a broader pool.
Yeah, I think if I could just jump in here to follow up on that point, because I think this is really important, because we talk often about skills being separate and apart from everything else that companies are doing. And I think what we've learned is that companies aren't just focused on skills. They're focused on skills as it relates to apprenticeships, as it relates to the hiring of individuals with criminal records. So it's, again, part of that ecosystem building that I think is critical to the ability of companies and the opportunity for companies to open the aperture to a wide variety of individuals with knowledge, skills, and abilities.
And internally, too, incumbent workers and
Absolutely.
advancement within the organization.
Absolutely.
Vicki,
Right.
you wanted to
I was going to say, I think it's so important, but I think skills means something different to everyone. And I think if you asked yourself or you asked your employees or maybe even asked your children, what are your skills? I think sometimes you would get a blank stare as to not everyone knows what their skills are. And so I think what we all have to get better at as leaders and individuals is helping our team see the skills that they have, because it's not easy to navigate the systems that we have in place. And so I think we assume that they have the tools, that we assume that they understand their skills, and I think the bottom line is they don't. They don't. And so we have to get better as a leadership team of really articulating what those skills are. And to your point, what are the skills necessary to do the job? Not what's on paper and maybe the role that you've played, but what are the skills that you bring to the table?
Yeah, maybe the way we think about it, it's really taking a process of making what's currently implicit and making it explicit, right? Which is often pretty difficult, right? So right now we have blunt proxies, right? So it's like, I require a certain number of years of relevant experience, and we look for job, degrees that are sort of generally relevant, but what does that actually mean for the work you're doing? Well, a lot of people might even have trouble saying, what are the skills required for your own position? Right? So it's almost like you have to really dig deep in like what is required for success, what is necessary versus nice to have versus we'll develop ourselves, and then building around that, right? And it could be anything from like a really granular, we're doing a skills-based hiring, really different badges, or it could be an apprenticeship program. It's a very integrated approach, but it's being very deliberate about being explicit about what's needed, and then building something equitable that is open for people who can actually do that, right? And making sure what you're building is not excluding people based upon, who can do the work, who can contribute.
And just to throw in on that, I think it's also then important to recognize why that system is being perpetuated right now. Because it is not because employers want to be excluding millions and millions and millions of really talented people from the job pool. It's, we did some focus groups with HR professionals and we asked them about their hiring process. And one person said that she on average has about 20 minutes to go through 200 resumes and identify the top 5 candidates in order to pass them along to a hiring manager. And so if that's the paradigm, one, that's problematic on its own, but it's definitely problematic if we are asking them to make a complete shift in how that process happens. And right now that shift is towards something that's less efficient and higher risk, or is at least perceived as higher risk, and doesn't have the kind of solid grounding in the ROI that people perceive degrees to have. And I think we can do it. We just need to figure out how to work within the confines of how much time and energy and personal and business capital employers are willing to put into the conversation.
And I completely agree with you in that ability to sort of communicate what you know and are able to do, the ability for an employer to receive that information, and there are, we're in 2023 now. We ought to be able to use technology to do all those things, which is something that the Chamber Foundation has certainly spent a lot of time and focus on. Let's talk about the people real quick, the learner, the worker. What will this sort of focus on skills do to increase access for those who might not have had access to a traditional post-secondary pathway? And Vicki, I think of the 1 million or so folks that access the GED every year, how does this approach really support those folks?
Yeah, it's fascinating that when I use this statistic, that 40 million adults are outside in the US right now without a high school diploma. And everyone says, 40 million, how can that be? And unfortunately, the number is increasing with COVID. And so for us, one of the things that we've really focused on is that adult learner didn't fit the K through 12 system. And so what happened is they were put in a classroom, told to learn a certain way, and that didn't work for them. Or life circumstances got in the way. Mom or dad had cancer, I dropped out, I was bullied, I have depression, I have anxiety, all of the things that you can imagine. And so what we started doing was really assessing their learning style. And this was fascinating, is that when a learner finds out how they learn, it opens up the entire ecosystem of who they are as an individual. And then they start thinking to themselves, okay, I'm not different, I'm not weird, I'm not this dropout that everyone told me that I was. I just learn different, I think different. And what we found is that our learner is auditory. What that means is that they love to talk about it, they love to explore it, and that's why they didn't fit through K through 12, because the minute you talk, the teacher tells you to be quiet, they don't want you to do what you're supposed to do, and you're not focused. And so I think for the learner right now with the skills, it's all about who are you as an individual, and then how do we match that to where you're at in your journey? Because again, too often we try to fit everyone into the same box. You have to go to high school, you then go on to college, and you go get a job. And what we're saying now is, let's find out who you are. Let's learn how you learn. Let's learn what fits into your ecosystem of your brain. And then they earn their GED, and then we do an aptitude test. And so now we can tell you, wow, you are really good at problem solving, or you're really good at communication, or guide them to, and it's not throwing out the degree, it's just that the degree might not be for everyone. And so let's take those skills and put you in an apprenticeship. Maybe you're a really good problem solver, so this fits the technology role. Or we're doing apprenticeships in green energy jobs. Someone says, what's green energy? And the minute you talk about it, using your hands, getting outside, making the world more sustainable, everyone's fascinated by that. So I think the bottom line is that we have to, as a society, start meeting the learner where they're at and not telling them to fit into this box that we've done for so long.
Thank you for that. I want to spend just a minute with Dane and Clayton real quick. Our 3 organizations, SHRM, BRT, and the Chamber, released a statement of sorts today in support, our three organizations supporting skills-based hiring and supporting employers to implement. Talk a little bit about why each of you thought that work together, as painful as that may have been over the course of months to get all of us with the same words, why that was important to your organizations and what you hope maybe we can all do together next. Clay, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I think it is principally, I think, important because all three of our organizations are squarely focused on the employer. And one of the analogies I like to use when we talk about the skills space is I don't know about you all, the first time I got into a Tesla, I didn't know what to do. It was all screens. I didn't know how to drive it. It made me feel very uncomfortable. It's like collectively we've built a Tesla, but we haven't actually talked to the driver in any way about how to drive a Tesla. And if that driver is necessary for that Tesla to move, then you have to figure out how to talk to the driver. And so the driver in this case, there are two. There's the talent side, right? But in our case, there's the supply side, the employer. And we have a lot of employers out there right now who abstractly think Teslas are really cool, but wouldn't know what to do if you put them in the driver's seat. And we are in a position collectively to, I think, hit that tipping point. If we can, unify resources, figure out common conversations to have, figure out common vocabulary, and I think it's a really exciting moment. We're just at the beginning of figuring out how we're going to collaborate together, but I really am glad that we got the statement out today and for what comes next.
Labor of love.
Yeah.
For us, one might say that for all of our organizations, whether it's CEOs, CHROs, or other C-suite executives, that the driving force behind the focus on skills is really about the need to fill 9.8 million jobs.
Right.
And I would say to you, having been in the room with CEOs, speaking with CEOs about what's driving them on this particular issue, and quite frankly, all of the workforce initiatives that we have at the Business Roundtable, it's really about opportunity. It's really about opportunity and economic mobility, not just for the people that are looking for jobs today, not just for the people that are looking to advance in their career. Excuse me, I shouldn't have said jobs because this is about careers. But this is about generational change. This is about getting children to see what's possible by looking at their grandmother, their father, their mother, their aunts and uncles. The second thing I would say is this work is an enterprise responsibility. It is not just the work of the HR, the CHRO, or anyone in the talent function in the organization. The CEO sets the direction and says, this is what we need to be doing. But it really is the HR function, the DE&I function in the company, yes, the general counsel. Everyone bears a responsibility for doing this work to try to ensure that we're successful. And the last thing I'll say is, I think what's valuable about the partnership among the three business organizations is that it's not just about the large businesses. This is about the small and medium-sized businesses. The small and medium-sized businesses, many of our suppliers who don't have the capacity to do what our companies are doing. So how do we produce tools and resources that can help not just inform their work, but will lead them to a point of success that makes a difference in the individuals they're trying to hire and the individuals who currently work for them but are looking for more opportunities.
I want to ask you a question, Andy, because we're obviously talking about skills-based hiring, but in our sort of conversations about this and in talking about this panel, I know that word sort of skills might seem limiting, and you have some thoughts about that. I would love to hear them.
Yeah, I hope I don't sound like the member of the choir singing a little out of key.
Right.
But
okay.
I think something you said earlier was really important. I think this is really about how do we connect people based on who they are with those roles in which they can be productive, contribute, and will thrive, right? Ultimately. Yep. And skills are something that it's sort of a statement of what one can do, right, which maybe serves as a better baseline for filtering at the top of the funnel for who should be considered for a role. Right? If we're going to get rid of degree requirements, we need something to filter, right, in the digital age, and so maybe that's one way to look at it. But once you get on top of that, how do you connect people based upon their aptitudes, right? The things that they're good at, their goals, things that they enjoy, and also their mindset, right? And if you're able to do that, you're going to connect people into roles that, you might not overly engineer in terms of the job mobility pathways, but require a little bit more of the intangible. Where do you fit? Is it good for the culture? Is it good for you personally? But if we're able to do that, I think we can go much farther than if we just considered skills as the baseline, right? So I think, and one example is we're a philanthropic community. We have about 700 or 800 philanthropists and business leaders who contribute to our work, and so we get to talk to large companies all the time. And one of them is one of the world's largest sort of industrial manufacturing organizations that a few years ago sort of said, we actually think the greatest sort of quality for success is contribution motivation. It's not just that you have the technical skills to work on in the factory floor, but are you motivated to find ways to contribute, see opportunities, call them out, be entrepreneurial in little ways and in big ways? And they've been doing that for a few years, and they've found that those who implemented that well, they're finding more talent mobility within the organization. So people moving up faster, moving also adjacent into different roles faster, and the compensation is moving up more quickly as well. And so they're pushing that even lower to the frontline managers to make that part of their work. And so I guess our point is let's make sure we're considering this holistically, and we're not imagining a future that only takes us part of the way to where we want to go. And I think one confounding element of this is the skills conversation already has part of this. So if you look at some of the skills frameworks that a lot of us are using around soft skills, for example, they'll include things like optimism, proactivity, happiness, compassion. And it's are these skills or are they something else? So if we can be a little bit more, I think, precise in our language and how we describe what we need in that explicit sense, we might be able to have better results.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that right now, the degree mindset isn't just about skills. And when someone looks for a degree on a resume, they are making all sorts of assumptions about what that degree has provided to that person. And it isn't about the skills to do the job, or it's not only about the skills to do the job. And someone was talking about this earlier, that particularly once you're in the door in the world of work, it's often the case that people don't even ask what you got your degree in, let alone how well you did, what you learned, things like that. And so what the degree is a proxy for many of the things that Andy is now encouraging us to make explicit. The components that have to do with your ability to do work, to work with others, to engage successfully in a kind of organism of people, and to sort of have the grit and drive to succeed over time. And that's not confined to people with degrees. It's just, in some ways, easier to proxy because we've decided that the degree means all those things. So what happens if we stop saying that and we say, to Dane's point, that everything from a professional driver's license to a PhD is a credential, and then on top of that you have all of the things that actually make us human, and hiring whole humans as a frame as opposed to hiring degrees?
I think this is, I want to pick up on the degree point too, because I think even if you eliminate the degree, that does not necessarily mean a change in behavior and practice, because we're trying to change the culture of an enterprise, of a company. And so it really requires, if I were to look at one of my member companies, I'd go to Vistra. So, okay, Vistra rewrote 800 job descriptions. But that was, yes, important, but what was more important is the training of the hiring managers, the people on the front line. Are you still looking for the degree, even though it's no longer required for a certain number of positions? Or are you really opening up the mindset of the people on the front line that say, you get an interview, you get an interview, and you get an interview, and ultimately, and you get hired, even though you don't have the bachelor's degree? So I think let's not underestimate the importance of changing the culture of some of these companies as well.
I think that's really important, and the culture piece leads me to think about challenges associated with doing all of this, and biases that we all carry with us, and biases towards degrees, or what do you identify? Well, I don't know. Let's talk about challenges. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are to really advancing sort of a skills-first ecosystem. Vicki, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, it was actually fascinating. Last night at dinner, we were having this discussion, and I think it's a really, really good question because we talk about the degrees and skills, but I think as individuals, when we interview or we look at on paper someone that has a degree and someone that doesn't have a degree, I think every one of us is going to wonder why. Why do they not have a degree? And then we're going to wonder, okay, what skills do they really have? And so I think every one of us has biases, and I see this in the GED world every day. If you looked at someone who got their GED and a high school diploma, immediately you say, well, you're a high school dropout versus a high school graduate. And so I think the bottom line here is that we all have work to do when it comes to this skills framework, and we all have work to do to say it starts with us. And we can't assume that someone else on our team is doing this. We can't assume that the HR team's doing this. It's some of the things that you were saying, Dane, is that we have to really look at the individual. And the way that I can best describe this is I told this story last night. There's a young man named Justice that I met along the circuit on a panel. And Justice was a high school dropout, lived out of his car, and navigated his life through a car and through different homeless shelters. He decided he wanted to get his GED, and he had to figure out how to catch the train or the bus to get to the homeless shelter before they closed, then get to his adult ed center the next day, and then get back to the next one because he had to jump around. He couldn't stay at the same homeless shelter. And I was talking to him about his life, and he said, I didn't even realize that my entire life was project management. Getting from one center to the next, navigating where I was going to eat, how I was going to eat, how I was going to catch the train station. And that to me, and by the way, Justice is in my life forever, that to me is a skill set that you're never going to see on a resume. The only way that you see that is if you actually have a conversation with Justice and you understand who he is, what he's done. That's how you start getting to the skills framework that's out there. And that's what we all have to start doing, is stop looking at this piece of paper and start looking at them as a human.
To approach that question a little bit from the other side, from the employer side, I think, and this may get to your point in terms of being able to see things like what Justice has. I think right now, when we talk to HR folks and hiring managers and executives inside employers, there's a significant challenge in not understanding what the ROI would be for changing. So why would I change if I can just stay the same, right? Which is a constant refrain you should always confront in every conversation about change management. And then that moves very quickly into a conversation about sort of the ability to trust the things that would make it possible for me to change. There are over 1 million credentials that people can take right now from something like 60,000 different providers just in the United States. There are hundreds and hundreds of startups that are popping up every day that are promising to be the AI panacea for your hiring and upskilling issues. And many of them are quite good, but it's a significant challenge for an overworked HR professional or a hiring manager who's maybe hiring 2 people a year to really think through how to sort of take those steps and do it in a way that scales. And so for us, we are then saying, okay, well, if the challenge is that the universe of things is mostly there, but it is not organized in a way that busy, harried people can easily access it, then our job at these enterprise-level organizations is to figure out how to organize it and make it easier for employers to get to yes. And I think part of what's going on when I look at something like what Education Design Lab is doing or what Opportunity at Work is doing, where they are trying in various ways to take the more ineffable demonstrations of experience and give job seekers the opportunity to put those into learning and employment records, or to articulate them through some sort of system to say, when you do this process, when you navigate the world in this way, that is project management, and we are going to figure out how to credential you for that, and then we're going to put that in front of an employer. Suddenly something invisible is visible, and it's in the language that an employer can use, which decreases that barrier and makes it more likely that the employer can get to yes.
Yeah, let me kind of hone in on 2 populations, which I think are, yes, a challenge, but also an opportunity. We have 80 million people in this country who have a criminal record. Misdemeanor, all the way more severe crimes. We have a quarter of the incarcerated population who can't find work. Challenge, huge opportunity to open the doors for these individuals. We now have Pell grants that are available to individuals who are incarcerated, and the efficacy of those programs, actually the completion rates of individuals who go through a training program while incarcerated is in some cases much higher than individuals who've not been incarcerated. So we should really hone in on that population, and it's part of what we're trying to do through the Second Chance Business Coalition that we co-lead with some other groups, including SHRM. The second challenge we have is the immigrant population. We have a little bit of a problem with the H-1B visas and the credentialing requirements. That really limits internal mobility. If you can't move to another job if that's not what your H-1B visa is in. Like, we all know, we're not here to debate the challenges with the US immigration system, but we have a number of individuals, whether they're refugees, they've come through to the United States through legal pathways, that we are not taking advantage of the skills they bring to the table. And I think that's another untapped population moving toward this skills-based approach on the front end and the advancement side that I think could help address some of the problems that we have.
I think the perceived risk, right, where a lot of these skills-based initiatives go to die is in companies where on the surface maybe it looks like it's a good place to start, right? CEO says this is a priority, we should do this work. HR works on the systems and the pipelines, opening the filter to bring in new talent. But then the hiring manager goes, nah, go with the guy with the degree, or go with even if I'm looking at 2 resumes. And part of that reason is it's the concentration of that risk on that decision is with the hiring manager who has to then deal with that hire or have to deal with the fact that I'm not as productive or there's things that are happening that I didn't know about. So why would I make that leap? And the solution to that is really based on the culture and the risk environment that the company creates. So one example is Pinnacle Insurance, which is a large company based in Colorado, and one of their cultural pillars is we invest in people. And so, unlike a lot of companies, they're trying to figure out how does that manifest. It manifests in actually the decisions by hiring managers to make investments in new populations. So they've been a leader in youth apprenticeship, one of the largest employers in the state around that. And part of the reason is instead of when leaders in the company are going to hiring managers, they're asking, what have you done differently this year to invest in people? Right, so they're constantly thinking about, what am I doing that's innovative and different, as opposed to I'm comfortable doing the same thing and I'm safe there. So I think it really goes back to culture, somebody said earlier, and really changing that risk profile that you put on the talent leaders.
Okay, we got 40 seconds. Is this a flash in the pan? Is this like the future?
Oh, it was early. Well, it'll stop in a second.
Okay, is it 2:20?
18.
They lied. They did it early. We're just going to sit here.
Yeah.
If your phone's not going off, you have a problem.
How come they can tell you it's going to happen at 2:20 and then they do it 2 minutes early?
They just want to keep you on your
Keep us on our
toes.
toes.
I feel like there's something really wrong with that. Okay, great. Now we can finish
That's right.
with one last question.
Oh my.
It might keep going.
Delayed. Well, this phone didn't go off before, now it did. Might be the provider network.
Okay, I'm just going to say, okay, are we going to make real progress on this? Like, is this going to be the future, or is this a flash in the pan?
So there were some stats from earlier that I think are sort of important to note. That right now, there's like 1 million fewer people every year over year, who are enrolling in 4-year degrees. And that the trajectory is not upward on that, right? And at the same time, we are seeing a sort of explosion in jobs that are sort of not articulated around degree-related curricula. And those jobs are not going to go away. So, when we think about it at SHRM, we think about this as sort of accelerating an inevitable movement. Now, does that mean that it's going to go well or smoothly? And then does that mean there are no barriers to sort of widespread adoption? Absolutely not. There are 15 states that have removed the degree requirements for their public sector jobs. I think there are 12 of them that have given no direction to those public sector leaders about how to hire without degrees. And so that could create absolute
Yeah.
chaos for millions and millions of people and
Federal
sour them on the
government's
concept.
still trying to sort of make
Right.
their way towards this, right?
But I think, our general philosophy, why we're in this, is that we think this is the inevitable future of work. It's just a question of whether it's going to be an easy pathway or a hard pathway, and we encourage as many employers as possible to get on the easy pathway, which might feel hard now, but is going to get them farther in the long term.
Okay, so we've got to stop talking about this as an initiative, because that makes it sound like we're responding to what the big thinkers want everyone to focus on for the next year and a half. This is about creating opportunity for people. This is about our ability as a country to compete. We're all worried about China. We're all worried about all these other countries. But what's it going to take to be economically competitive? What's it going to take to create opportunity for a lot of individuals? Skills is one of many efforts that we should be focused on. And so I really hope that this is not just a flashpoint, that we're here 5 years from now talking about the successes we've had, and how we have changed policy and practice at scale. Because if we don't change policy and practice at scale, we will not change lives of individuals.
Wow, I could hug you up here. Should I hug you?
Off stage.
Okay, off stage. So what I would say is, this to me is this is the future, and if we don't change, we're all in trouble. And I think the bottom line is that we have to stop treating everyone the same, and we can't expect that success equals 4-year degree, master's, PhD. Success is a longevity of a career with a path to success that I can create for generations to come. I think that's the bottom line.
If I was going to all that, I think if I was going to predict how this might advance, I think some companies are going to make this the core to their competitive advantage going forward, and they'll say talent in this untapped pool that nobody else is really understanding or tapping into, and we're going to make that core to what we're doing, and they're going to win. And then all their peers, competitors are going to say, "Oh man, we're behind. We need to follow."
Right.
So I think the competitive dynamics will drive it, and then those who are willing to jump in first are going to be the winners.
Yeah. Join me in thanking this great panel. Thank you guys so much. All right.